In the heart of every man, there's a strength we can't deny. Through the storm and through the pain, we're reaching for the sky. Lift your head.
Hello, welcome for fifth, the fifth episode of the Resurrect Patriarchy podcast. A really thought-provoking, a really emotion-provoking name. I do know that. Maybe to some of you it will really, like this is something that you will be happy to hear. Maybe for some others it will be quite repulsive to you. And I get it because I myself was repulsed by this word for so long. But do we actually know what we mean? I don't even need the earpods, whatever. What do we even mean when we're talking about patriarchy? That's what I've been talking about in the first episodes of this podcast. And yeah, this episode is kind of an improvised one, but I keep wrapping my head around this concept and the concepts of gender, masculine, feminine, what is power, what is leadership, because it's all kind of related, right? So we've been exploring what I mean by patriarchy. And what I mean by patriarchy is being empowered as a man to lead your family, to lead your people, to co-lead with other men, to compete for leadership, to struggle for power, with other men, but in a place that comes like from a place of love, not a place of fear or shame or resentment. Because when leadership comes from this place of fear or shame or resentment or even guilt sometimes, that's when leadership is subverted and power is being exercised for selfish endeavors. And the results of this subverted leadership is what people tend to identify to patriarchy today. It is what feminism tends to call patriarchy, and it is kind of what progressive people and liberal people tend to identify to patriarchy. And I believe that's a mistake. I mean, one could argue that it's all a matter of definitions. And, you know, I don't really mind calling masculine leadership another way than patriarchy, but yeah, the problem is because we see patriarchy as something subverted, then it really causes a masculinity crisis. How can I be an empowered man today? And so this confusion is really causing massive misunderstandings between people from the left and the right, people with different beliefs about God and the universe and how it works. And so, yeah, that's why I want to talk about this, because I have misunderstood masculine power as something that would necessarily be maybe not evil, but selfish. And so I was actually judging my own power, my own will, to be powerful in this world. Not powerful in a way that I would just be able to dominate everyone, but in a way that would actually get my needs met. And so I was always so afraid to speak up, call out people, or tell them what to do, even when the only reason I would tell someone what to do was because I could see it was in their interest to do so. And I could see that they needed a hand. But in this culture where we are judging patriarchy so heavily, it becomes more and more wrong and suspicious for a man to take the lead in any way. When it's actually more and more valued for women to take the lead. Now we look up to women who tell others what to do, because suddenly it's like this new rebel identity. You rebel against the oppressor. And that might be actually worthy to value this to an extent. It's always better for a woman to rebel against men who are being selfish. The problem is if it makes you entitled to just rebel against any man, because suddenly you feel self-righteous to rebel against masculinity itself. So yeah, I believe it's kind of a trap that is rooted in fear, that is rooted in wounds, in pain. And I'm willing to be I am being empathetic because I've suffered, I've been afraid of men as well when I was a child, even later in life. I've been afraid of men stronger than me. Um, of men that were being selfish in so many ways, and for some reasons I was not able to defend myself against them, so I was afraid. I was ashamed. I was terribly grieving the sympathy of this man. And so I judged them. I judged them and I rebelled against them in hidden ways and sometimes not so hidden ways. And maybe it's part of a process of, you know, getting back to a place where your needs are being met, but it's never the end of the road. It's never the end of the road, and you are also being selfish when you're doing this. And so it doesn't mean you should suppress doing this. You should suppress to rebel if that's what you can tell needs to be expressed, needs to be done. You should still do it while remembering it's not the end of the road, and you cannot just be satisfied to overthrow subverted power and then become a new form of subverted power, because you will be overthrown as well. That's just how things go, even if sometimes it takes time. Women who tell men what to do, disrespect them. They tell them what to do because they are feeling anxious, because they're afraid, or maybe they're resentful in some way. And so they step up because it's kind of an instinct as well. So it's understandable. They know that a man who doesn't handle his stuff is potentially a dangerous man. It's potentially a dangerous man or a man that is not going to be able to take care of them in any way. I'm not only talking about this kind of um, getting food to the table and protect from the dangerous enemies. I'm also talking about more subtle stuff, emotional safety, spiritual safety. If a man fails to make a woman feel safe, she will find a way to make herself feel safe. But the way a woman make herself feel safe is a fantasy. Which, what does it mean? It means that when a woman make herself feel safe, she actually makes herself and the interaction and their interactions with the men in her life. She makes herself less safe by making herself feel safe. Do you get that? It's kind of like a child who is afraid, and so he's afraid of something he's seeing. He's perceiving a danger, and so in order to feel safer because he's powerless against this danger, for whatever reason, he's closing his eyes to not perceive the danger anymore. And it's not because the child is closing his eyes that he is actually safer, right? And so it's kind of the same with the feminine. And I do not mean by that, women are bound to be adult child. That's not what I mean. But it's kind of another topic. I'm willing to stay on track with what I'm talking about right now. Because in a child, the child suffers that. He's got no choice. A grown-up woman uh, with her feminine instinct online, it's a choice she's making again and again because yes, women are able to take care of themselves to an extent materialistically, but if she's doing that too much, it's actually going to create a spiritual like she's going to be less and less okay spiritually. Because it actually feels dangerous to talk about this stuff. Why? Like, but it's true, so I'm going to keep going. Why? Why is that? Because, so I was saying women. A woman can take care of herself. She can provide for herself, but it's going to be more and more depolarizing to do so. Because she's going against who she is deep down. because she is, yeah, that's where it's getting tricky. She is being determined by her biological sex. What we identify, I mean, the concept of biological sex is what is how we get closer. It's how we get the closest from what is polarity, you know? That's a great debate. And for most of my life, I've been really fighting against the idea I just talked about. So you see, I'm not just some one more bigot or whatever. I've been going through transgenderism. I've been telling myself I was a woman for years. But that was a delusion. That was a fantasy meant to make me feel safe, but which was actually making me less and less safe, actually, and spiritually. I was wrong. When I was telling myself I was a woman, I was wrong. I can't unsee it. Because on the other hand, I would love to believe that, well, I do have the belief that we are creators and that what we choose to believe, we eventually have the power to make it come true. And so if I go, what that means is that I believe that if someone summons enough energy with the power of their mind, they do have the ability to change sex biologically. And by the way, which we do see that happening with some life forms that are not so far apart from us. So we see it in the world, uh, animals changing biological sexes. So somehow I believe that someone who chooses to change sex and so can do so, can actually biologically do so if they're trying really hard. People are gonna think I'm crazy, but think of it. You'll see. But while I believe it's possible for an individual to do that, it's not the spiritual choice to make. Yeah, no. I believe what's going to happen to this person is exactly the same thing that happened to me. Because I was telling myself I was a woman. I was telling myself that. I was affirming it. I was describing it. And I would say that it did make me experience a feminine experience of my being. And I did believe that to some extent it's because it had no better way to do that. It actually allow a part of me that was being stuck to be freed. And so what happened is that by allowing myself to think of me as a woman, it liberated energy that I needed, but that was kind of stuck because I believe somehow that it was just for women and that I could only get this part of the energy I needed by identifying to women. But once that was released, once I got back, once I yeah, once I reintegrated this part of me that was not supposed to be identified to women, when I reintegrated that feminine part of me, because I do believe we're all made of masculine and feminine, but it doesn't mean we're all kind of bi-gender and bisexual and fluid, which is something I believed for so long, but I don't believe it anymore. When I gave myself the space to experience it, it made me finally become more and more of the man I thought I was not able to become. I believed when I was young I was a failure as a man. And so I tried to repel, I tried to not have anything to do with the feminine side of me. And the more I was doing that, the more I was failing at being a man. That's paradoxical. But all that to say that, no, I actually believe that the person that choose to believe they're another gender that they actually are, they're only going to believe this to the extent that they need to. in order to start being okay with the actual gender again. And one thing I have seen in me and in other people going through gender dysphoria is that they experience a change in desires, physical desires, or romantic desires once they go through the transition. So, for example, I've heard a lot about men telling themselves they are a woman and going through the transition and starting to take hormones, for example, or stuff like that. And once they're doing that, they actually and they wanted to be loved by a man, for example. And once they do that, they actually change in their physical desires. So now they start to get attracted by women physically and romantically. And so it's kind of like it is what they needed to actually reach some balance and get back to something that is more, I'm going to use the term normal, but in a scientific sense, not in a ostracizing way towards anyone. And so yeah, that's actually really interesting. I hope it was interesting to hear too. Most people going through this process, they will, at least most people I've been speaking with or heard about, it's not the way they will tell themselves the story. I would just say that they have the right to change their mind and just be fluid. But I believe it's because, I know it's because, yeah, they're struggling with really painful things, and so that they have a hard time to be willing to actually look into this mess and be and see the harsh truth, which is something we're all struggling with to an extent in some moments of our life. So this is it for this episode. And yeah, see you soon for the next one.
Every son with a heart of gold and wisdom to our journey's just begun. Rise up, lift your head high. Feel the power in your heart, we will be denied. Rise up, let your spirit soar. Together we'll inspire and we'll be much more.